Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie, is said to have floated the idea of charging richer people more for the licence fee as part of reforms for the payment system, as he claimed there are fundamental questions about its longevity. The government have, however, since poured cold water on the idea. But would this be an acceptable approach? Well, I can now speak with ex-BBC journalist and friend of the show, Danny Kelly. Danny, there's an irony here, isn't there? And that is this. On the one hand, the BBC expect older viewers to cough up more, and yet every opinion poll in the land shows us, Danny, that older people are the least satisfied with the service they get.
Well, the BBC don't give a damn about older people because, as I discovered when I was binned for being 50 and white from the BBC in the Midlands to diversify the lineup, they're after a younger audience because the longevity of the institution, that's the BBC, Martin, relies on the next generation of licence fee payers. And this is quite important, and it's a great point that you've raised. Anybody who's over the age of 50, certainly 60, the BBC just doesn't care about you because they're interested in attracting the next generation of licence fee payers. And when those 25-year-olds that they're after at the moment become 40 and 45, they'll stop caring about them too. Otherwise, the BBC just won't exist. It relies on new blood, if you like, when it comes to the licence fee. So that's a great point. They just don't care about middle-aged people.
And yet, they're now floating the idea of older people paying more. How would that work? Would it be means tested?
I know if ever you wanted to satisfy your curiosity that the BBC had a socialist agenda, it's the fact that they want the proletariat to pay more, to not pay, and the bourgeoisie to pick up the bill. This is classic Marxism for you. I know we're treating this lightly, Marty, but how would they means test you? Are you going to have to provide evidence of your bank account? And of course, people's financial situation, they change. You know, people's finances are fluid. So one year you may be what they class as wealthy, and then the next year you're not. So it's a situation that I find just impossible. How it's going to work, I just don't know. It's something that I just don't feel happy about myself, really, Martin. And people will quite legitimately say, well, look, it's like taxation. But with taxation, although people don't enjoy paying tax, they understand why they have to pay tax. And that's the big difference with the BBC. People just can't get around their heads why they have to pay 160, soon to be 170 quid, even if they don't watch the damn thing. And that's the difference. So when people try and throw in the red herring of, well, it's just like general taxation, yes, it is. But the thing is, the BBC want you to pay them even if you don't watch them. And of course, it sticks in the craw of many people because of this perceived bias. Whether it's correct or not, it doesn't really matter. It's how people perceive things. At the end of the day, they're the ones funding it.
And Danny, rather than charging more for the same thing, we could actually strip things back a bit. How about cutting costs? And maybe we could start with some overpaid megastars, such as Gary Lineker. There's a few quid to save there, isn't there?
Yeah, over £1.5 million. If I was the BBC DG, I'd just buy him out of his contract, because there are three things that when people say scrap the BBC licence fee, Gary Lineker is always in the top three. He's just not worth it. Yes, he's fabulous. I love the guy, by the way. I'm an Everton fan. He scored 30 goals for us in one season. He's a great footballer, but he's not worth the political fallout. Again, it's all to do with perception. People will say, well, if you're a critic of Lineker, then, you know, I don't agree with you. So what's your point? And my point is, okay, it doesn't matter whether you agree with my political viewpoints. It's the fact that I pay 160 nicker to have to listen to him trot out certain things, and it makes me feel uncomfortable. So, yeah, you could start cutting back. Although, Martin, you and I disagree. I'm an advocate of the BBC and the licence fee. I think there is a role for it. But this, I'm sorry, even though I am a fan of the BBC, this makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, Danny Kelly, former BBC journalist and always ever-present friend of the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent stuff. And what do you think out there about that? I mean, people talk a lot about the huge salary bill, but do you think we do get good value for money? I mean, friends of the BBC would say it's only a few quid a week, no more than a couple of beers, perhaps.